Today we are doing The Story of a Disappearance and an Appearance by M.R. James. And afterwards, we'll pull our Witchy Tarot deck. So, this is from 1919. It's letters written during a search for a missing clergyman building up to a nightmarish Punch and Judy show, which was, it's kind of like a puppet show. They used to act out like certain skits and stuff, and I think it was kind of like they made like a fool of either somebody. So anyways, they're called, that's why it's called the Punch and Judy show, because I remember too the first time I saw it, so I was like, what the hell are they talking about? So they were going to begin. What struck me most was this, that I was somehow unable to leave. That's a line from this. The letters which I now publish were sent to me recently by a person who knows me to be interested in ghost stories. There is no doubt about their authenticity. The paper on which they are written, the ink, and the whole external aspect put their date beyond the reach of question. The only point which they do not make clear is the identity of the writer. He signs with initials only, and as none of the envelopes of the letters are preserved, the surname of his correspondent, obviously a married brother, is as obscure as his own. No further preliminary explanation is needed, I think. Luckily, the first letter supplies all that could be expected. Letter 1. Great Crishall, December 22nd, 1837. My dear Robert, it is with great regret for the enjoyment I am losing, and for a reason which you will deplore equally with myself, that I write to inform you that I am unable to join your circle for this Christmas, but you will agree with me that it is unavoidable when I say that I have been within these few hours received a letter from Mrs. Hunt at B to the effect that our Uncle Henry has suddenly mysteriously disappeared, and begging me to go down there immediately and join the search that is being made for him. Little as I or you either, I think, have ever seen of Uncle, I naturally feel that this is not a request that can be regarded lightly, and accordingly I propose to go to B by this afternoon's mail, reach it late in the evening. I shall not go to the rectory, but up at the King's Head, to which you may address letters. I enclose a small draft, which you will please make use of for the benefit of the young people. I shall write you daily, supposing me to be detained more than a single day. What goes on, and you may be sure, should the business be cleared up in time to permit of my coming to the matter after all, I shall present myself. I have but a few minutes at disposal. With cordial greetings to you all, and many regrets, believe me, your affectionate brother, W.R. Letter 2. King's Head, December 23rd, 1837. My dear Robert, in the first place, there is as yet no news of Uncle H, and I think you may finally dismiss any idea, I won't say hope, that I might after all turn up for Christmas. However, my thoughts will be with you, and you have my best wishes for a really festive day. Mind that none of my nephews or nieces expend any fraction of their guineas on presents for me. Since I have got here, I've been blaming myself for taking this affair of Uncle H too easily. From what people here say, I gather that there's very little hope that he can still be alive. But whether it is accident or design that carried him off, I cannot judge. The facts are these. On Friday the 19th, he went as usual shortly before 5 o'clock to read evening prayers at the church. And when they were over, the clerk brought him a message, in response to which he set off to pay a visit to a sick person at an outlying cottage on the better part of 2 miles away. He paid the visit and started on his return journey at about 6:30. This is the last that is known of him. The people here have very much grieved at his loss. He had been here many years, as you know, and though, as you also know, he was not the most genial of men, and had more than a little the martinet in his composition, he seems to have been active in good works and unsparing of trouble to himself. Poor Mrs. Hunt, who has become his housekeeper ever since she left, Woodley, is quite overcome. It seems like the end of the world to her. I am glad that I did not entertain the idea of taking quarters at the rectory, and I have declined several kindly offers of hospitality from people in the place, preferring as I do to be independent, and finding myself very comfortable here. You will, of course, wish to know what has been done in the way of inquiry and search. First, nothing was to be expected from investigation at the rectory, and to be brief, nothing has transpired. I asked Mrs. Hunt, as others have done before, whether there were any unfavorable symptom in her master, as it might portend a sudden stroke or attack of illness, or whether he had ever had reason to apprehend any such thing, but both she and also his medical man were clear that this was not the case. He was quite in his usual health. In the second place, naturally ponds and streams have been dragged, and fields in the neighborhood which he is known to have visited last have been searched without result. I have myself talked to the parish clerk, and more important, have been to the house where he paid his visit. There can be no question of any foul play on these people's part. The one man in the house is ill in bed and very weak. The wife and the children, of course, could do nothing themselves. Nor is there the shadow of probability that they or any of them should agree to decoy poor Uncle H out in order that he might be attacked on the way back. They had told what they knew to several other inquirers already, but the woman reported it to me. The rector was looking just as usual. He wasn't very long with the sick man. He ain't, she said, like some what has got a gift in prayer, but there if we was all that way, however, would the chapel people get their living. He left some people when he went away, and one of the children saw him cross the stile into the next field. He was dressed as he always was, wore his bands. I gather he is nearly the last man remaining who does so, or at any rate in this district. You see, I am putting down everything. The fact is that I have nothing else to do, having brought no business papers with me, and moreover it serves to clear my own mind, and may suggest points which have been overlooked. So I shall continue to write all that passes, even to conversations if need be. You may read or not as you please, but keep the letters. I have another reason for writing so fully, but it is not a very tangible one. You may ask if I have myself made any search in the fields near the cottage. Something, a good deal, has been done by others, as I mentioned, but I hope to go over the ground tomorrow. Bow Street has been informed, and will send down by tonight's coach, but I do not think they will make much of a job. There is no snow, which might have helped us. The fields are all grass. Of course, I was on the qui vive for any indication today, both going and returning, but there was a thick mist on the way back, and I was not in trim for wandering about unknown pastures, especially on an evening when bushes looked like men and a cow lowing in the distance might have been the last trump. I assure you, if Uncle Henry had stepped out from among the trees in a little copse which borders the path at one place, carrying his head under his arm, I should have been very little more uncomfortable than I was. To tell you the truth, I was rather expecting something of the kind. But I must drop my pen for the moment. Mr. Lucas, the curate, is announced. Later, Mr. Lucas has been and gone, and there is not much beyond the decencies of ordinary sentiment to be got from him. I can see that he has given up any idea that the rector can be alive, and that so far as he can be, he is truly sorry. I can also discern in the even more emotional person that Mr. Lucas, Uncle Henry, was not likely to inspire strong attachment. Besides Mr. Lucas, I have had another visitor in the shape of my Boniface, mine host of the King's Head, who came to see whether I had everything I wish, and who really requires the pen of a boss to do him justice. He was very seldom and weighty at first. Well, sir, he said, I suppose we must bow our head beneath the blow, as my poor wife had used to say. So far as I can gather, there's neither hide nor yet hair of our late respected incumbent scented out as yet. Not that he was what the scripture terms a hairy man in any sense of the word. I said as well as I could that I suppose not, but could not help adding that I had heard he was sometimes a little difficult to deal with. Mr. Bowman looked at me sharply for a moment, and then passed in a flash from solemn sympathy to impassioned declamation. When I think, he said, of the language that man see fit to employ to me in this here parlor over no more a matter than a cask of beer, such a thing as I told him might happen any day of the week to a man with a family, though as it turned out he was quite under a mistake, and that I knew at the time, only I was that shocked to hear him I couldn't lay my tongue to the right expression. He stopped abruptly and eyed me with some embarrassment. I only say, dear me, I'm sorry to hear you had little differences. I suppose my uncle will be a good deal missed in the parish. Mr. Bowman drew a long breath. Ah, yes, he said, your uncle. You'll understand me when I say that for a moment it had slipped my remembrance that he was a relative, and natural enough, I must say, as it should, for his you bearing any resemblance to him. The notion of any such thing is clean ridiculous. All the same, I have bored in my mind, you'll be among the first to feel, I'm sure, as I should have abstained my lips, or rather I should not have abstained my lips with no such reflections. I assured him that I quite understood, and was going to have asked him some further questions, but he was called away to see after some business. By the way, you need not take it in your head that he has anything to fear from the inquiry into poor Uncle Henry's disappearance, though no doubt in the watches of the night it will occur to him that I think he has, and I may expect explanations tomorrow. I must close this letter. It has to go by the late coach. Letter 3, December 25, 1837. My dear Robert, this is a curious letter to be writing on Christmas Day, and yet after all there is nothing much in it, or there may be, you shall be the judge. At least nothing decisive. The Bow Street men practically say that they have no clue. The length of time and the weather conditions have made all tracks so faint as to be quite useless. Nothing that belonged to the dead man, I'm afraid, no word will do, has been picked up. As I expected, Mr. Bowman was uneasy in his mind this morning. Quite early I heard him come, holding forth in a very distinct voice, purposely so, I thought, to the Bow Street officers in the bar as to the loss that the town has sustained in their rector, and as to the necessity of leaving no stone unturned. He was very great on this phrase in order to come at the truth. I suspect him of being an orator of repute at convivial meetings. When I was at breakfast, he came to wait on me and took an opportunity when handing a muffin to say in a low tone, "I hope, sir, you recognize as my feelings towards your relative is not actuated by any taint of what you may call malignity. You can leave the room, Eliza. I will see the gentleman as he requires with my own hands. I ask your pardon, sir, but you must be well aware a man is not always master of himself. And when this man has been hurt in his mind by the application of expressions which I will go so far as to say had not ought to have been made use of." His voice was rising all this time and his face growing redder. "No, sir, and ere, if you will permit of it, I should like to explain to you in a very few words the exact state of the bone of contention. This cask, I might truly call it a firkin of beer." I felt it was time to interpose and said that I did not see that it would help us very much to go into that matter in detail. Mr. Bowman acquiesced and resumed more calmly. "Well, sir, I bow to your ruling, and as you say, be that here or be it there, it don't contribute a great deal, perhaps, to be at present question. All I wish you to understand is that I am prepared, as you are yourself, to lend every hand to the business we have for us." And as I took the opportunity to say as much to the officers not there 3/4 of an hour ago, to leave no stone unturned as that may throw even a spark of light on this painful matter. In fact, Mr. Bowman did accompany us on our exploration, but though I am sure his genuine wish was to be helpful, I'm afraid he did not contribute to the serious side of it. He appeared to be under the impression that we were likely to meet either Uncle Henry or the person responsible for his disappearance walking about the fields, and did a great deal of shading his eyes with his hand and calling our attention by pointing with his stick to distant cattle and laborers. He held several long conversations with the old woman whom we met, and was very strict and severe in his manner, but on each occasion returned to our party saying, "Well, I find she don't seem to have no connection with this sad affair. I think you may take it from me, sir, as there's little or no light to be looked at from that quarter, not without she's keeping something back intentional." We gained no appreciable result. As I told you at starting, the Bow Street men have left the town. Whether for London or not, I'm not sure. This evening I had company in the shape of a bagman, a smartish fellow. He knew what was going forward. But though he has been on the roads for some days about here, he had nothing to tell of suspicious characters, tramps, wandering sailors, or gypsies. He was very full of a capital Punch and Judy show he had seen the same day at W, and asked if it had been here yet, and advised me by no means to miss it if it does come. The best Punch and the best Toby dog, he said, he'd ever come across. Toby dogs, you know, are the last new thing in the shows. I have only seen one myself, but before long all the men will have them. Now, why, you will want to know, do I trouble to write all this to you? I'm obliged to do it because it has something to do with another absurd trifle, as you will inevitably say, which in my present state of rather unquiet fancy, nothing more perhaps, I have to put down. In a dream, sir, which I am going to record, and I must say it is one of the oddest I ever had. Is there anything in it beyond what the bagman's talk and Uncle Henry's disappearance could have suggested? Your repeat shall judge. I am not in a sufficiently cool and judicial frame to do so. It begins with what I can only describe as a pulling aside of curtains, and I found myself seated in a place I don't know whether indoors or out. There were people, only a few, on either side of me, but I did not recognize them, or indeed think much about them. They never spoke, but, so far as I remember, were all grave and pale-faced and looked fixedly before them. Facing me was a Punch and Judy show, perhaps rather larger than the ordinary ones, painted with black figures on a reddish-yellow ground. Behind it on each side was only darkness, but in the front there was a sufficiency of light. I was strung up to a high degree of expectation, and listened every moment to hear the panpipes and the row-tow-tow-it. Instead of there came suddenly an enormous, I can use no other word, an enormous single toll of a bell. I don't know how far off. Somewhere behind, the little curtain flew up and the drama began. I believe someone once tried to rewrite Punch as a serious tragedy, but whoever he may have been, this performance would have suited him exactly. There was something satanic about the hero. He varied his methods of attack. For some of his victims he lay in wait, and to see his horrible face, it was yellowish-white, I may remark. Peering round the wings made me think of the vampire in Fuseli's foul sketch. To others he was polite and carmine, particularly to the unfortunate alien who can only say shalabala, though what Punch said I could never catch. But with all of them I came to dread the moment of death. The crack of the stick on their skulls, which in the ordinary way delights me, had here a crashing sound as if a bone was giving way, and the victims quivered and cacked as they lay. The baby, it sounds more ridiculous as it gone, the baby I'm sure was alive. Punch wrung its neck, and if the choke or squeak which it gave were not real, I know nothing in reality. The stage got perceptibly darker as each crime was consummated, and at last there was one murder which was done quite in the dark, so I could see nothing of the victim and took some time to effect. It was accompanied by hard breathing and horrid muffled sounds, and after it Punch came and sat on the footboard and fanned himself, I looked at his shoes, which were bloody and hung his head on some side, and snickered in so deadly a fashion that I saw some of those beside me cover their faces, and I would gladly have done the same. But in the meantime, the scene behind Punch was clearing and showed not the usual house front, but something more ambitious. A grove of trees and a gentle slope of a hill with a very natural, in fact, I should say a real moon shining on it. Over this there rose slowly an object which I soon perceived to be a human figure with something peculiar about the head. What I was unable at first to see, it did not stand on its feet, but began creeping and dragging itself across the middle distance towards Punch, who still sat back to it, and by this time I may remark, though it did not occur to me at that moment, that all pretense of this being a puppet show had vanished. Punch was still Punch, it is true, but like the others, was in some sense a live creature, and both moved themselves at their own will. When I next glanced at him, he was sitting in malignant reflection, but in another instant something seemed to attract his attention, and he first sat up sharply and then turned round and evidently caught sight of the person that was approaching him and was in fact now very near. Then indeed did he show unmistakable signs of terror. Catching up his stick, he rushed towards the wood, only just eluding the arm of his pursuer, which was suddenly flung out to intercept him. It was a revulsion which I cannot easily express, that I now saw more or less clearly what this pursuer was like. He was a sturdy figure clad in black, and as I thought, wearing bands. His head was covered by a whitish bag. The chase now lasted I do not know how long, now among the trees, now along the slope of the field. Sometimes both figures disappeared wholly for a few seconds, and only some uncertain sounds letting one know that they were still afoot. At length there came a moment when Punch, evidently exhausted, staggered in from the left and threw himself down among the trees. His pursuer was not long after him and came looking uncertainly from side to side. Then catching sight of the figure on the ground, he too threw himself down. His back was turned to the audience. With a swift motion, twitched the covering from his head and thrust his face into that of the Punch. Everything on the instant grew dark. There was one long, loud, shuddering scream, and I awoke to find myself looking straight into the face of, what in the world do you think but a large owl, which was seated on my windowsill immediately opposite my bedfoot, holding up its wings like two shrouded arms. I caught the fierce glance of its yellow eyes, and then it was gone. I heard the single enormous bell again, very likely, as you were saying to yourself, the church clock, but I did not think so, and then I was broad awake. All this, I may say, happened within the last half hour. There was no probability of my going to sleep again. So I got up, put on clothes enough to keep me warm, and am writing this rigmarole in the first hours of Christmas Day. Have I left out anything? Yes, there was no Toby dog, and the names over the front of the Punch and Judy show were Kidman and Gallop, which were certainly not what the bagman told me to look for. By this time I feel little more as if I could sleep, so this shall be sealed and wafered. Letter 4. December 26, 1837. My dear Robert, all is over. The body has been found. I do not make excuses for not having sent off my news by last night's mail, for the simple reason I was incapable of putting pen to paper. The events that attended the discovery bewildered me so completely that I needed what I could get of a night's rest to enable me to face the situation at all. Now I can give you my journal of the day, certainly the strangest Christmas day that ever I spent or am likely to spend. The first incident was not very serious. Mr. Bowman had, I think, been keeping Christmas Eve, and was a little inclined to be captious. At least he was not on foot very early, and to judge from what I could hear, neither men nor maids could do anything to please him. The latter were certainly reduced to tears, nor am I sure that Mr. Bowman succeeded in preserving a manly composure. At any rate, when I came downstairs, it was in a broken voice that he wished me the compliments of the season, and a little later on, when he paid his visits of ceremony at breakfast, he was far from cheerful, even Byronic. I might also say in his outlook on life. I don't know, he says, if you think with me, sir, but every Christmas as comes round, the world seems a holler thing to me. Why, take an example now from what lays under my own eye. There's my servant Eliza, been with me now, going on 15 years. I thought I could place my confidence in Eliza, and yet this very morning, Christmas morning too, of all the blessed days in the year, with the bells are ringing and all, and like that, I say this very morning, had it not been for Providence watching over us all, that girl would have put, indeed, I may go so far as to say, had the cheese on your breakfast table. He saw I was about to speak and waved his hand to me. It's all very well for you to say, yes, Mr. Bone, but you took away the cheese and locked it up in the cupboard, which I did, and had the key here, if not the actual key, one very much about the same size. That's true enough, sir, but what do you think is the effect of that action on me? Why, it's no exaggeration for me to say that the ground is cut up from under my feet, and yet when I said as much to Eliza, not nasty, mind you, but just firm, like, what was my return? Oh, she says, well, wasn't no bones broke, I suppose. Well, sir, it hurt me, that's all I can say, it hurt me, and I don't like to think of it now. There was an ominous pause here, in which I ventured to say something like, yes, very trying, and then asked about what hour the church service was to be. 11 o'clock, Mr. Bowman said with a heavy sigh. You won't have no discourse from poor Mr. Lucas as what you would have done from our late rector. Him and me may have had our little differences, and did do, more's the pity. I could see that the powerful effort was needed to keep him off the vexed question of the cask of beer, but he made it. But I will say this, that a better preacher, nor yet one to stand faster by his rights, or what he considered to be his rights. However, that's not the question now. I, for one, never sat under it. Some might say, was he an eloquent man? And to that, my answer would be, well, there you've a better right to perhaps to speak of your own uncle than I have. Others may ask, did he keep up his hold of the congregation? And there again I should reply, that depends. But as I say, yes, Eliza, my girl, I'm coming 11 o'clock, sir, and you inquire for the King's Head pew. I believe Eliza had been very near the door, and I shall consider it my vow. The next episode was church. I felt Mr. Lucas had a difficult task in doing justice to Christmas sentiments, and also the feeling of disquiet and regret, which, whatever Mr. Bowman might say, was clearly prevalent. I did not think he rose to the occasion. I was uncomfortable. The organ wooled. You know what I mean. The wind died twice in the Christmas hymn, and the tenor bell, I suppose owing to some negligence on the part of the ringers, kept sounding faintly about once in a minute during the sermon. The clerk sent me a man to see to it, but he seemed unable to do much. I was glad when it was over. There was an odd incident, too, before the service. I went in rather early and came out, 2 men carrying the parish bier back to its place under the tower. For what I overheard them saying, it appeared that it had been put up by mistake by someone who was not there. I also saw the clerk busy folding up a moth-eaten velvet pall, not a sight for Christmas Day. I dined soon after this, and then feeling disinclined to go out, took my seat by the fire in the parlor with the last number of Pickwick, which I had been saving up for some days. I thought I could be sure of keeping aware of this, but I turned out as bad as our friend Smith. I suppose it was 2:30 when I was roused by a piercing whistle and laughing and talking voices. Outside in the marketplace, it was a Punch and Judy. I had no doubt that my bagman had been seen at W. I was half delighted, half not. The latter, because my unpleasant dream came back to me so vividly. But anyhow, I determined to see it through, and I sent Eliza out with the crown piece to the performers, and I requested they would face my window if they could manage it. The show was a very smart new one, and the names of the proprietors I could hardly tell you were Italian, Foresta, and Calpigi. The Toby dog was there, and I had been led to expect all be turned out, but did not obstruct my views, for I was at a large first-floor window and not 10 yards away. The play began on the stroke of 2:45 by the church clock. Certainly was very good, and I was soon relieved to find that the disgust my dream had given me for Punch's onslaughts on his ill-starred visitors was only transient. I laughed at the demise of the turncock, the foreigner, and Beetle, and even the baby. The only drawback was the Toby's dog developing a tendency to howl in the wrong place. Something had occurred, I suppose, to upset him, and something considerable, for I forgot exactly at what point. He gave a most lamentable cry, leapt off the footboard, and shot away across the marketplace and down a side street. There was a stage wait, but only a brief one. I suppose the men decided that it was no good coming after him, and that he was likely to turn up again at night. We went on. Punch dealt faithfully with Judy, and in fact with all comers, and then came the moment when the gallows was erected, and the great scene with Mr. Ketch was to be enacted. It was now that something happened in which I had certainly not yet seen the import fully. You have witnessed an execution and know what the criminal's head looks like with the cap on. If you are like me, you never wish to think of it again, and I do not willingly remind you of it. It was just such a head as that I, from my somewhat higher post, saw on the inside of the show box. But at first the audience did not see it. I expected to emerge in their view, but instead of that, there slowly rose for a few seconds an uncovered face with an expression of terror upon it, of which I have never imagined the like. It seemed as if the man, whoever he was being forcibly lifted with his arms somehow pinned or held behind towards the little gibbet on the stage. I could just see the night-capped head behind him. Then there was a cry and a crash. The whole show box fell over backwards. Kicking legs were seen among the ruins, and then 2 figures, as some said, I can only answer for one, were visible running at top speed across the square, and disappearing into a lane which leads to the fields. Of course everybody gave chase. I followed, but the pace was killing, and very few were literally at the death. It happened in a chalk pit. The man went over the edge quite blindly and broke his neck. They searched everywhere for the other until it occurred to me to ask whether he had ever left the marketplace. At first everyone was sure that he had, but when he came back to look, he was there under the shadow box, dead too. But in the chalk pit it was poor Uncle Henry's body was found, with a sack over the head and the throat horribly mangled. It was a peaked corner of the sack sticking out of the soil that attracted attention. I cannot bring myself to write in greater detail. I forgot to say the men's real names were Kidman and Gallup. I felt sure I had heard them, but no one seems to know anything about them. I am coming to you as soon as I can after the funeral. I must tell you when we meet what I think of it all. So that was the story of the story of a disappearance and an appearance by Emma James. So let's do our tarot reading, and then I've got several other stories I want to do by him. And let's see. So what's our witchy tarot? Okay, Monty, what do you want to tell us today? Let me just shuffle real quick. Let's see. So I'm going to do also Two Doctors, and I think it's called Stay at Whitminster by him. I already did a lot of the major stories. The one story I like by M.R. James, it's not a copyright though. I mean, it's not out of copyright to do it. It was published in the 90s, so we can't do it. But the Fenstatin Witch, that's a great story. I love it. I guess the family found it in the papers afterwards, and then they published it in the 90s. And I guess unless you get permission from the estate to do it, maybe that's an idea someday. Maybe when I'm bigger, I could like get permission to do it. Maybe they'll let me. Who knows? But if not, I can't do it, obviously. So The Fenstatin Witch, though, by M.R. James, is a great story, but it's still under a copyright. So it's not in the public domain. Okay. Two of Wands. So there's like some looking out at the world is what this card literally means. And like across water usually too. And Six of Pentacles, like there's something with generosity, giving and receiving. And the Star, positive healing energy. So it's like looking out across the water. There's like some desire for generous giving and receiving, equal reciprocity, and then the Star is healing energy. All right, I will see you on the next video.